Welcome to episode 68 of Contrarian Corner. I'm Ben Kellerin. Today we have a very special guest on. I was on his podcast recently, so this is the back end of a home and home, so we can get into some of our last conversation, but also some different things that he's more of an expert on than me. So I think it'll be interesting because we'll get into European and UK politics, precious metals, current events, what's going on in the commodities market, what's going on with broader financial markets, and kind of where he sees the world headed from here. But Robert, thanks for coming on.
Ben, pleasure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, so I figured we could start with what's going on in Europe, and I know that's something that is a little closer to home for you. But one of the biggest pieces I've seen recently is that either four or six, depending on the headline. AFD politicians have mysteriously turned up dead in the lead up to those election races, and that's a pretty interesting signpost. And I would guess not a coincidence, but who knows at this point. But what's your kind of view on what's going on there, and then maybe what's going on with European politics broadly right now? Because it seems like a little bit of a dumpster fire to me.
That's a very good way of putting it. I think a dumpster fire is a good one. Yeah, between 4 and 6 is right. There's been no actual number given. Some people saying up to 6, between 4 and 6, whatever it is. But for anyone that doesn't know AFD, quite far right politics in Germany, of course. German history and anything to do with the far right does have certain connotations throughout history, and the fact that up to 6 people have mysteriously appeared dead before local elections, it doesn't make sense at all. And I think that we're starting to get to the stage, with gaslighting and whatnot, where people are really just starting to call BS on all these things. I don't really have any more information on that apart from, again, local elections in Germany. A lot of people seem to be scared of not just the far right but the right hand side in general. And for these people to appear dead just before these elections take place is very concerning. To me, it just screams that there's probably bigger things at play here.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that's kind of a good segue into bigger things at play, potentially in the UK, where you see, and this is, I'm sure, part of what goes into my social media feed and the algorithm and all that, but you see lots of like flag protests and other things where the cops and other groups basically treat the native population of the UK very different from the immigrant population, and that's where I think two-tier Kier got his nickname there. But what's kind of the update on what's going on in the UK? Because that seems like at least from what I've seen, like a little bit of a powder keg right now.
Oh yeah, it's chaos what's happening. I should say, for some reason, I think we've got a bunch of work people in the apartment complex. So if you hear banging, my apologies. It's people working on, I think, drainage at the moment. So yeah, apologies if there's background noise
Nothing you
there.
do about it. It happens.
UK. Ooh, where do we start? Right. Good question. Loaded question. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I will try and deal with it as eloquently as possible. So if we roll back a few years, we have had conservative government, more traditionally, right leaning on the spectrum. We've had them in charge for quite a while, and they were far from perfect. They oversaw events in 2020 and so forth. And it got to the stage where last year, 2024, people had basically had enough of them. So we had a general election in 2024, and it was, I think I could have become prime minister. It was that straightforward. You knew what was going to happen. People were not going to vote for the Conservative Party. People, reform were on the radar, but not a lot going there. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, his publicity stunts were a little bit dopey, to say the least. So you're left with the other party, which is the Labour Party, traditionally left-wing leaning. And it was obvious to anyone that they would have a majority as well. And again, it's a case of the previous government had done really badly over a long period of time. There were no other main options, so therefore, Labour being the other main option, sorry. So therefore, anyone looking at the UK, even people in the UK like myself, would have said, right? 2024, you are going to have a Labour majority. There's no debate about that. That's exactly what happened. And then from there, somehow, they've managed to make it worse, which is incredible achievement, not just financially, but socio-economically as well. Let's tackle the finances first. So we're aware, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, that around the world, not just in the UK, there's going to be more currency printing. There are a lot of financial issues around the world at the moment. And again, if you go down the route of QE and so forth, that's going to devalue the currency. That in turn pushes up the price of, in this case, gold, silver, and so forth, which is why people like yourself, myself, we're a firm believer in the precious metals. So financially, the UK is in a very bad place. What the current government done, and of course, politics is politics. They, bashed at the opponents. Well, the Conservatives. Oh, you've got a £22 billion black hole in the budget here. This isn't good. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the current one, Rachel Reeves, or Rachel from Accounts, if we're being informal, she's managed to turn herself, and the Labour government have managed to turn that £22 billion black hole into somewhere between 40 to 50 billion 1 year later, which I think is a great achievement. In a very sarcastic way, it's a great achievement what they've done, and that's as a result of numerous things. It is the funding of an immigration policy that's just causing disaster and will continue to cause disaster. That's in line with a lot of Europe, to be fair. There is really bad energy policy. So again, the UK's bent on net zero. We must be green and clean and so forth. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that the world should be a greener and cleaner place. I think most people would agree with that. But the UK's approach to that makes no sense whatsoever. We have gas fields in Lincolnshire, up in the north of the country. We have massive oil reserves as well in the North Sea, but we have stopped handing out licensing and so forth. We seem to have an inability to get nuclear projects up and running, and we've been subsidising wind and solar and pouring billions into those projects. And at the same time, what's happening is that energy bills are increasing because it's a mix of everything we've just said, and yet they don't seem to realise what they're doing, or they just don't care. I'm still on the fence as to what one it is, because sometimes politics are blind and stupid. It can happen, but then we have to ask, actually, is what they're doing, by design? So for me, on an energy point of view, personally, is you need more gas, you need more oil, because if you're going to get greener and cleaner, I think it's a case of taking, one step back before you take two steps forward. Look at China, for example. Yeah, they've got loads of coal plants and whatever, but they're also one of, if not the most actively green countries in the world. And what I mean by that is they are creating a lot of nuclear plants. They are creating thorium plants in the middle of the Gobi Desert, I think it is. So they're becoming very green, but they've taken a step back from a carbon point of view to take two steps forward. We're doing the opposite in the UK. We're making, I think, everyone poorer by design. So we're faced with a government that has inherited a bad position fiscally. So they've inherited that, but they've made it worse. We've got energy policies that make no sense whatsoever. We've got the highest energy bills, I think, in the world, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of electric unit prices. And that's putting less cash in people's pockets. At the same time, we also have an immigration policy. We touched upon this when you appeared on the Kontrarian Capitalist podcast. It doesn't help because people are getting infuriated that it seems to be that anyone that comes into the country is getting preferential treatment rather than the citizens of the United Kingdom. And I think that's starting to reach a boiling point. And we've seen that with what you mentioned with flag protests. I can deep dive into that if you want, but I'll leave it there for now. And there's a lot of issues, put it that way.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thread to pull on, because my kind of opinion is that a lot of the European countries are in just a giant mess of their own making. And when I look at what's gone on with immigration, and you see like it's all kind of a running joke at this point where like someone gets arrested for tweets and they like obviously treat that very differently for the native population versus, oh, this person's an immigrant and he's a part of one of these Pakistani gangs that is like basically been given free reign. So what's kind of the, I guess, to dig into the rabbit hole a little bit, what's the deal around the flags? Is that something that leads to something bigger, or is it just kind of a show that like, hey, we don't like this and nothing's going to come of it?
I have a feeling the flag itself might be the Black Swan event that really upturns everything. Let's break down flag history. So when I'm talking about the flag, I'm talking about the flag of St George, the cross of St George. I'm talking about the flag of England. I'm not talking about a Union flag or the Union Jack, which is what you put on a shipping vessel. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the English flag. Now, the English flag over the years has had a lot of issues. It can be deemed as, I don't know why, but it can be deemed as being far right. It's normally associated with English football hooligans or soccer hooligans. When you go abroad in Europe, we've always been bad at drinking, and then using that drunkenness to incite, violence around the world. And I know that England's had a lot of other historical issues as well, beating up Scotland, beating up Wales, going to war with France and so forth. So I think there's a thing at the moment, Ben, where if you look at the flag of St George, the flag of England, then people, for some reason, think that is just a racist flag. I'm not going to compare it to the Confederacy flag in the UK, because I don't know your history as well as you do, so I'm not going to make that comparison. But if I had to compare it to something quickly in my head, that's the first flag that I would think of. Creates division. The people of England have a very bulldog spirit. If you tell us to do something, I like to think that over the years we have pretty much stuck two fingers up and said F off. We've done that over the years, and I think people should be proud of that. That we like to think that we're not under the thumb of others. I think that's changing. But getting to the point, the point is that a boiling point's being reached because we have a willingness, apparently, in England and the United Kingdom in general, we're happy to have all these, Palestinian flags flying around and X, Y, and Z, LGB, whatever. I'm not being rude. I forget the letters. That's my autism creeping in. I forget the letters, but that flag, the rainbow flag. So they're all happy to be flown around, and they're symbols of supposed Palestinian freedom and so forth, whatever it might be, whatever flag it is. But when it comes to the English flag being flown, apparently that's a problem, and I don't understand that personally, and I think it's higher powers trying to almost crush the spirit of the people. And if you do that for long enough, maybe it's anywhere in the world, but certainly in England, if you do that long enough, people will stand up and they will revolt. And I think we're starting to see that. What doesn't help is that some local councils, not all of them, but local councils have been going round taking the flags down. The British flags, the English flags, not the Palestinian flags, not the rainbow flags. So that two-tiered system that you referred to with two-tier care and a two-tiered police force, that doesn't help at the moment. So from a flag point of view, I have a feeling that's the thing that's really going to push people over the edge. As far as I'm concerned, the flag of St George, the flag of England, is something to be proud of. We don't have a perfect history, just like most countries. We are not a perfect place. We do not have a perfect history. But you should get behind that flag and be proud. And when your own local councils and your own government don't seem to be behind that flag as a matter of pride, then that's a problem. And I think that is going to has become, and it's going to become an even bigger problem for, British natives, English natives. They're going to get to the point where they've had enough, and, that's going to lead. I've written about this before, and I've said it on my podcast, I've said it on other people's podcasts as well. That will lead to a civil war. I don't want it to, but I think it will, because the government are pushing all the wrong buttons at the moment. But to wrap it up, in essence, we seem to have an ability to want to fly the flags of other countries or other states or other things that mean things to other people. But when it comes down to our own flag, again, whether that be the flag of England, the flag of St George, the cross of St George, or the Union flag, apparently that's a bad thing. And for myself, I don't understand that, and I think a lot of people over there are starting to get cheesed off of it as well.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for the Americans and people in power to go back to our roots and start running guns to the rebels over there in the UK, but that's maybe a little bit down the road. But well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It is interesting to kind of pay attention from afar, because I think you kind of see a lot of these things bubbling up on different topics in different places, and it does seem like there's like everyone I kind of talked to on this, they have this feeling that like something big is coming. I don't think anyone knows exactly what it is, but I just have this feeling kind of in my gut that like I think something's coming. I don't think most people are ready for how chaotic things might get. But maybe one other thing while we're kind of talking on Europe, I don't know if you've been paying attention to this, but what's going on in the European bond markets? I keep seeing like yields basically breaking out to, I think one is either the UK is at like 30-year highs on yields, and then France is like highest since 2011. Some of these different things. I think the only one that's in reasonable shape is Switzerland. But what's your kind of high level view on kind of the European bond market and where that might go? And that can kind of be a good segue into broader financial markets, because I think there's a lot of people that are like seeing Europe as an opportunity. I think there's a reason to stay away.
My high level view is it's knackered, to be to be honest with you.
Just about maybe spit my drink there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's knackered. Yeah, there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on there, and it's, again, if we just relate that back to what we've just been speaking about, something's coming down the road. I agree with you. I think it's going to be some form of hot war. Again, I'm not just saying that because I want it to happen. I don't want it to happen. Of course, I don't want it to happen. But history shows that these things do happen, and it's all interrelated. So I think it will happen again. And again, boots on the ground in the UK, there's a lot of people getting very unsettled with everything that's going on. It could be, dare I say, a religious war that creeps out because of it's not necessarily the level of immigration, it's the people that are coming in that doesn't help. And that doesn't help in the UK, it doesn't help in most parts of Europe as well. And I think that's going to be the issue that comes down the road. And if people start to realise that, we've seen through history before, what governments will need to do is to create a diversion, and I think that diversion is going to be exactly what you allude to, something bigger coming down the road that takes people by surprise to mask the current challenges. Going back to your question, I've got a chart open here, so I'm just looking at the 10-year actually at the moment for the 10-year gilt, as we call it in the UK. I mean, that's up at 4.81.
Yeah, feel free to share your screen too if you want, because people will be able to see that.
Yes, we've got 10-year gilt here. We call them gilts in the UK. So yes, I'm aware the 30-year is higher. I think that's about 5.8%, I think it is, at present. So yeah, this is where we're at, 4.81%. Year on year, that's up 18.67%. This is on the Financial Times. So we're on a 6-month period at the moment. Let me just bring up a 5-year trend. So you can see from obviously what was going on back in 2020, again that rate was down, pretty much zero, slightly higher than that. So we can see that over the years it's creeping up, big spike here as well, and then like most things, been a bit choppy, but it is rising and it will continue to rise to the upside. So that's where we're at on the 10-year. If I just also go to this article as well, again, I like using the BBC to some extent because I like to see what they what BS they talk, and I can just say the opposite because they're normally wrong. But again, UK borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, adding pressure to Rachel Reeves. Again, this is Rachel Reeves. Now, I do feel sorry for her to an extent because, as you know this as well from what you do, it's easy to bash politicians, but we've kind of got to keep a bit apolitical where we can. So I'll give her a bit of credit and say that she did inherit a bad position, but again, she somehow made it a lot worse. That is what it is. But yes, UK government long-term borrowing costs have hit their highest level since 1998. In fact, that 30-year bond's 5.72%. My apologies, I said 5.8. And it's just going to add more pressure moving forwards. I don't have the numbers for Spain or for other parts of Europe, but I'm well aware that they are increasing. And, that's not a good thing at all. That's obviously created financial pressure. I think most people are asleep at the wheel. They're not aware of what's coming. We have also seen the ECB, European Central Bank, and the Bank of England. They have reduced rates as well, which is just going to add fuel to the fire. And I've got a feeling we're going to have to see the same thing happening with the Federal Reserve later on in September. Wrong move, in my opinion, but it looks like it's going to happen. So we've got rate cuts going into an inflationary environment. That's not good. It's just everything that you want to possibly go wrong is looking like it's going wrong at the moment. But again, with the amount of gaslighting that we have, not just in the UK and in Europe, but worldwide, I don't think people are paying attention to what's going on. I imagine most people that listen to this do know what's going on, but as part of what we do, our message is to share with other people to get them to wake up, basically. So it's on a dangerous path. It's on a very slippery slope, so to speak, and it's going to get worse. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it is pretty uncertain, and I think for anyone holding some precious metals, it is an interesting time to be looking at markets because while there's chaos in bond markets and people are worried about S&P and valuations there, I think we're going to continue to see gold, silver, platinum, all those really continue to move. And that's something that you talk about every once in a while on your Substack. And why don't you get into precious metals, and if you have a favorite setup there, if you think certain things are going to continue, maybe we can see what your view is on those three.
Well, to keep it simple, if you are of the belief that your central bank, no matter where you are in the world, is going to either perform quantitative tightening, QT, or quantitative easing, QE, and you believe that there's going to be more currency printing, then you should be looking at taking a position straight away in physical bullion, physical gold, physical silver. We can add platinum to that list as well. So if we're keeping it very simple and people are listening to this and that's their personal belief, well, just by that currency printing alone, that's going to put pressure on the fiat currency, which in turn will increase the price of the precious metals themselves. So that's what I would say is the overarching thesis here. Going on gold, for myself, for gold, silver, I'm long term. So, a movement in gold of $100, $200, it doesn't bother me. I will check the price because I do that as part of the newsletters, so I will check the price. But it doesn't keep me up at night. I'm not fussed if gold goes down to 2,000, if it goes up to 20,000, whatever it might be. Great, superb, I'm happy with that. In terms of silver, again, similar thing. I am a firm believer that gold to silver ratio, so gold silver ratio is the amount of silver you could buy for 1 ounce of gold. It's about 87, I think, at the moment, give or take. It has been as high as 100, 120 in the last 10 to 15 years. Historically, it's been as low as, I think, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, albeit that was in ancient Egypt, so a little while ago. But even in medieval Europe, 500, 600 years ago, the ratio is about 15 to 1. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to go back to 15 to 1, but it might do, it might not. But it should certainly go much lower. So the impact that that has on silver is that if we just keep the numbers simple, let's just say the ratio is 80 to 1 at the moment. So you could buy an ounce of gold or you could buy 80 ounces of silver. Okay. If that ratio over time goes down to 40 to 1 and you've bought 80 ounces of silver and the ratio goes down to 40 to 1, you could convert that silver into 2 ounces of gold. So automatically you've doubled your gold holdings without really doing anything. You've let the economy in the world be what it is. You've taken advantage of that ratio and you've converted that way. So in terms of personal strategy, that's what I'm looking to do moving forwards. This is why I'm a keen believer in silver. There's many other reasons as well. For some people, they like the gold standard, quite literally, pardon the pun. And for them, gold is for them. Yeah, it's an inflation hedge. It helps to preserve wealth, and it's got 3,000 to 5,000 years of history of that, so it does do what it says it's going to do. And some people like that, and I'm an advocate for that as well. I think that's a great idea. But for me, if I'm going into the weeds, I'm looking at that gold and silver ratio. I'm looking at the structural deficit that's in the silver market as well. I forget the amount of ounces, but it's a very high number. That structural deficit is looking to continue, certainly towards the end of 2030. So we've got a physical silver market that's in a structural deficit. We've got a gold and silver ratio that's too high. And as history shows, although this doesn't happen every single time, in a commodities bull market, what normally happens is gold leads the way and then silver will violently play catch up at some point. Now that doesn't happen every single time. There's a couple of times where that hasn't quite happened, but most of the time the general rule of thumb is that gold will lead the way, silver will violently catch up. So even if gold is revalued, or the US monetize the asset side of the balance sheet, as Scott Besant likes to say, fine. If another revaluation happens and it's pegged to the amount of debt that there is in the USA at the moment, I worked this out a couple of weeks ago, and it would be about $142, I think, $1,000 an ounce. I'm not saying that they would do that, but if they'd done that, of course, that gold and silver ratio is skew with. Silver will have to catch up, and I'm sure that it would. And then, of course, silver's got a lot of industrial uses as well. It's used, dare I say, in nuclear warheads. So it's used a lot in for military purposes as well. Of course, it's a very good conductor of electricity, albeit people use copper because it's much cheaper, and copper is the number one, but silver is number two in the world for conducting electricity. And it's got, of course, a lot of uses in electronics and so forth. So, yeah, silver's changed over the years. Last time I checked, there weren't iPhones in the 18th century. So, again, people wouldn't have known about the industrial uses as such years ago, but we do know about them now. And, yeah, platinum is similar. Platinum is a very thinly traded market. It has a lot of potential. Obviously, it's mainly used for catalytic converters and so forth, not just in the automobile industry. There's a lot of interrelated topics with regards to AI, nuclear, and the converters that you need for energy in that space alone. That is a very bullish thing for platinum as well. So if you listen to this and you are yet to take a position, please do not take this as financial advice. We are not financial advisors. I would say research physical gold, research physical silver first. If you are listening to this and you do have a physical position already, and you do have it in gold, but maybe not silver and not platinum, then I'd again suggest that you do your homework, do your research, and do what works for you. But ultimately, gold has stood the test of time. Gold, I think, will stand the test of time, and silver has proven most times that in a commodities bull market, gold will lead the way, but silver will violently catch up. And when it does, it can move. And I'm not saying we're starting to see that. I'm not going to be hyperbole and say just because it's gone over $40, that's it, we're off. Silver does have a way of surprising people and upsetting people when it wants to, but it's a good sign. Yeah, we've waited to break that barrier, and I think we're starting to see that here in early September. But it doesn't mean it's off. There's a lot of elements at play there, Ben.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting, and this is an argument that other people have made on silver being more industrial than a precious metal, and something where I kind of look at it as like it's not a precious metal until the price gets high enough, which I think eventually it will. And that's kind of, I think, where like people can talk about like, oh, it's mostly industrial and it has to be used for solar and all these different applications. But I just look at it and compared to where I think it's going, and even if you do get the gold out performance because it becomes like a central reserve asset, whatever it may be, I just look at the upside on something like silver is very skewed, and the same with platinum. So um, I think it is. There are other factors to consider with it being industrial use versus just gold as the kind of safe haven asset and right all the other monetary uses there. But I think the setup for the metals is pretty interesting, even though they've started to move. And when you kind of look at, like you said, with gold leading, I kind of look at some of the other commodities that have been lagging, like especially oil, where I think over the next 18 months, things are really going to move there. But what's your kind of view on maybe the rest of the commodities complex? We can start with oil or take it wherever you want, but are there any other commodities that are really on your watch list as kind of ideas or places to be looking?
So in the commodity wrap that I do every Friday, I keep a brief eye on oil, natural gas, but I use a Henry Hub price for that. I also look at the uranium futures. I know that market's incredibly opaque, but I just like to check in once a week with the numbers. I think anything priced in US dollars is going to go significantly higher. And again, we'll just go back with QT, QE that we were speaking about earlier on. If you believe that that's coming down the road for whatever reason, it doesn't matter who the president of the USA is. It could be Donald Trump, it could be JD Vance, it could be anyone on the left side. It doesn't really matter. If you think that QT and QE are coming, and they're coming with even more of a vengeance, that's going to put pressure on things that are priced in US dollars. So I do think oil is going to go much higher as a result of just that factor alone. But other things that I like to keep an eye on, I do think natural gas, again, using Henry Hub, I think that's wildly undervalued. I understand why it's being kept low, and there's a lot of supply at the moment. Again, you could be looking at natural gas, nuclear as well, so not just the AI stuff. So I understand from a point of view of why that's low, but just part of me thinks that's got to go much higher in the future. Oil as well, I wouldn't be surprised to see it drop even further first, but then that's when I'd be looking at, certainly from a trading point of view, that's when I'd be looking at an opportunity to go long. I still think it's got a bit more to the downside to go first personally, but after that, triple figure oil shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. There's a lot of talk out there about is it tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 assets. It's becoming hard to get out of the ground and so forth. So there's just a lot of simple supply and demand dynamics at play, I think, in the oil market. What else do I look at? Yeah, uranium futures, again, very opaque, but I think the future of uranium is very bright. We're starting to see a lot more in that space. Again, it's not just AI, it's not just nuclear energy in general. We're starting to see a couple of supply challenges, not just with Cameco, but also over in Kazakhstan as well. I'm really bad at pronouncing the name of the company. I think it's Kazatomprom. I think that's the name of it. It's a massive company over in Kazakhstan. So we're starting to see supply issues in the uranium market as well. I think that price has got to go much higher moving forwards. Again, gold and silver we've touched on. Yes, I agree with what you say about the monetary use of silver. Swan event, something happens and people start to realise it. I mean, even $40 silver, which is roughly where it is at the moment. Most people that are in the space are quite excited about that. So the contrarian part of me thinks, what could happen in the paper silver market for them to push that price down in the short term? But ultimately, everything else is in play. I think silver is going to go much higher, gold will go much higher, Brent crude or oil gas is going to go much higher, natural gas is going to go much higher, uranium is going to go much higher, palladium as well, platinum as well. I think everything pretty much is going to go much higher, to be fair. And again, you don't even need to be in my opinion, I don't think you need to be a technical expert on any of that either. If you think that the dollar is going to devalue, and therefore it could be quite, it can be that simple. So I'm hoping, I don't want to dumb it down too much, but the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I write about it, I think it could actually be that simple, to be fair.
Do you ever look at agricultural commodities or some of these other commodities that most people, even myself, have not paid much attention to over the last couple of years? Like, feel free to just say, yeah, I don't look at those as much, but like happening over the next couple of years for a variety of reasons, it's just very hard for me to get my head around like the whole agricultural commodities side of things. But do you ever look at those?
The only time I ever look at agriculture is when I have a thing called the mid-month macro and the monthly wrap, and I do that with Chris Steadley from Livestock Commodity Corner, and he's very attuned to things like soybeans, cattle, for example. So the only time I ever look at those markets, cattle. If you've ever seen a cattle chart, it's incredible. It's just green candle after green candle.
Just up and to the right.
Absolutely. Now, he said that you could put that down to government policy from 5 or 6 years ago. He said that was a contributing factor. But he also made a point that it's a very dangerous market to try and make an assumption about as well. Even though the chart, as you said, is just going up to the right-hand side there, he said it's a very difficult market to really get a grasp on. But overall, Ben, no, I don't really look at things like that. The only time that I will ever look at those charts and talk about it is when I do those effectively bi-weekly commodity videos with Chris over at Livestock Commodity Corner.
Yeah, interesting. I think there are just so many moving pieces with the agricultural side that it's hard for me to. I mean, there's plenty of stuff going on with the other commodities we talked about, but for agricultural, it seems like you have even more factors. Whether it's like, hey, this thing is like very dependent on weather, or there's like a disease, or like all these different massive impacts on some of the stuff. But I do find it interesting for some of them. But as far as any other opportunities or what you're seeing with broad markets, what's your kind of view for where the next several years lead? Like, do you think it's going to be like a capital rotation where you kind of see, okay, gold has been perking up and that continues to get more money flowing in, and like you kind of see capital rotating under the surface? Or do you think it's going to be a little bit of a mess on like the S&P and broader equities front?
It's a very good question, and I might come across as sitting on the fence here, but I think it can go one of two ways. So I've been saying for years that there should be a massive recession, etc., etc., etc. All hell should break loose, and it could be 1929 times 100 or whatever. I'm not the only person that said that. In terms of equity markets, again, I'll go back to the very basics. If the dollar is going to devalue, the Dixie goes down, etc., etc. I know the Dixie's not just a dollar, it's a couple of other things in there as well. Then if you look at an S&P chart or Dow Jones or Nasdaq in dollars and your currency is going down, the chances of that's probably going to go up. So it wouldn't surprise me if that were to happen. Again, I think they're just trying to kick the can down the road as long as humanly possible. So that's one option. That's the bullish case. They are those markets priced in US dollars. If you look at a S&P chart priced in Swiss francs or euros or pounds, it's not doing as well. But in dollars, it's doing quite well. So bear that in mind when we're talking about equity charts. So that's the bullish case, I would say, is that they're going to kick the can down the road. They're going to continue to drag the game. The administration have been quite clear about where they want the dollar to go, and that's definitely not to the upside. So I think that's the bullish case. Bearish case is all hell breaks loose. we see a breakdown in one part of the world. Obviously, Japan's quite a concerning place at the moment in terms of yields and demographics, to be fair. So some people have got their eyes on Japan. Point on that being is that if all hell breaks loose, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Europe, whatever it might be, that can send everything into a spin. So if every government is lowering their rates, importing whoever they want to import into the country or letting people in, that could create some form of hot conflict. We have the EU continually seeming to want to go down the war path as well. So again, if something like that happens and something like that is triggered, yes, all hell's going to break loose. If that happens, then you're going to see more spending. If you see more spending, you're just going to get more of the same. Now, if that were to happen, well, actually, in the EU, I think they've already set their targets of 5% of GDP for defence spending. Pretty obvious, but for some people it might not be obvious. They are preparing for a major conflict because it's going to hide everything, all the other civil issues that are at play at the moment. That then leads to more spending. If that happens, again, it's what we said earlier on. If you are printing more fiat currency units, again, the price of, say, gold, for example, is going to go much higher. Therefore, the biggest play from just a wealth preservation point of that list as well, because like you said, I don't just look at the industrial, the monetary aspect of it is incredible. And you would think that the world would be jumping up and down at $40 silver. Now, I think the world might be jumping up and down when it gets to 50, because that's a massive psychological barrier as far as I'm concerned. But again, if your long-term play is wealth preservation, getting yourself out of the system as best as you can, I think you're going to be wanting as much physical gold and physical silver as possible. And again, for most people, I imagine that physical silver is going to be much more accessible because of the price differential. I appreciate it's going to be a bunch of high net worths listening to this as well, that buying kilo bars of gold is not a problem. But I imagine for most people, even just the exposure to a few ounces of silver could be a massive different place, to be fair, Ben. I'm looking at gold, silver. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk with them as well. And Plan B. I'm a massive advocate of Plan B. Don't be stuck in the country where you are, especially if you're in Europe. It's probably a little bit different in the USA because of how much of a superpower the USA is at present. But if you're certainly in Europe, you need a Plan B. You need that second option. You need to be able to get out when you can. I've done it. I've also got Plan C in operation as well, to get myself around the world. And I think that's a massive thing moving forwards. And get some land as well if you can, and do the usual stuff to protect yourself. But in terms of physical plays, not just Plan B, Plan C, but it would be physical gold, physical silver. I think they're going to be big opportunities. And then we're not at the right time for it yet, but I do remember I had a podcast with Ali Osher or John Johnston, JJ, who's very prominent on Substack. I'd urge people to go and follow his work. Now, he said, he's been doing this for 50 years. He said that one of the biggest phrase in this is when the bond yields get so high, that's a turning point, and that's when you go long bonds. Not necessarily now, but he said there was an opportunity, I think, back in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't recall him taking advantage of it, because he didn't take advantage of it from what I remember. But he said that was a missed opportunity. And he said when that moment comes around again, and it will, that's where you want to go. But that's for a few years. I think
that's at least 5 to 10 years plus. I think there's going to be a lot of issues coming with all these different things. And if you look at interest rate cycles, they're not typically like, oh, we hit zero and then rising interest rates for 5 years and then we're back to zero. Like that's not typically how these cycles go. But whether that means 2030, 2035, 2040, like who knows at this point. But I think there will be a time, assuming this isn't the part of the cycle that blows up several different fiat currencies, then there's going to be basically a big opportunity to bonds at some point down the road, which is basically heresy compared to my current view and on the state of the world. But no, I totally agree. Eventually that cycle will get far enough to the other side where, at least for now, I kind of view bonds as certificates of confiscation. And at some point in the future, they'll be basically washed out and great opportunity. So is there anything else that we should hit on before we start to wrap up here? I feel like we kind of got everything from European, UK politics to my favorite commodities to talk about to markets. Is there anything else we should touch on briefly as we start to wrap?
A couple of things I would say is that the emotional intelligence needed when we're talking about what we're talking about and trying to map out what to do moving forwards is important. Don't become wedded to gold and silver, for example. There will be a time where they won't be the best things to be in. And that's going to be the time where, people like yourself and myself and people listening, we would have spent years talking about it and been an advocate for it. What we do in that situation is going to be completely different, but there will come a time where that cycle comes to an end, and then it's a case of making the decision then that works for you. Now, there's different people that will talk about different things. I have no idea what the future's going to look like, to be fair, but I do know that when it comes to that point where, gold and silver have topped or whatever, there's going to be a lot of people sat on a hell of a lot of wealth. And that is when you would look to, I would imagine, get out of that and put that into very undervalued things at the time. Now, that actually could be the stock market. I don't know what the great take-in will look like if that happens. But that would probably be the biggest opportunity at that time. Again, we could be talking 5, 10, 15 years, just like bonds. I'm with you on bonds. I agree with you. Certificates of confiscation for now. There will be an opportunity though, where if you can get in at X%, it will make sense to do so. And that might involve, again, selling gold and silver, platinum, whatever, and then taking advantage of that opportunity, because that'll be a new big bull cycle there. So I think the emotional intelligence is important. That is easier said than done. Of course, I appreciate that. And then it would be to have a plan. Again, have a plan and know what you're looking to do, know what you're looking to achieve. I mentioned at the start, I've got one eye on the gold and silver ratio. When that ratio hits a certain level, I will do one of two things. I will either put all the silver into gold or I will sell it. I don't know what to do yet because I've not got to that point because it's got a long way to go. But I've got the idea in my head. I won't wake up one day at, $100 an ounce and go, what do I do? What do I do? Because I've already got the plan written down. I've got a rough idea of what's going to happen. So that's the only other thing I'd say on that, Ben, is, obviously, if you're going to buy bullion and you're going to invest in bullion, do so with your own reasons. Know why you're doing it. Have a rough idea of what your exit strategy is going to be. And I think that will help out most people. Then you won't get caught off guard, and do understand that at some point in our lifetimes, gold and silver will not be the place to be. It is at the moment, in our opinion, and I could sing to the cows come home about gold and silver, but there will be a point where it's not the case, and the stock market, equities or bonds will be a better place to be, but we are nowhere near that stage yet. The end game's got to play out. We have no idea what the world's going to look like. And the only other point, as I mentioned earlier, I'd advocate is if you are in Europe or you do not have a plan B, you wouldn't put all your investments in one basket. Please don't put your capital controls are in place. They're in place in Spain. They will likely come into place in other parts of Europe as well. If you have the ability to get out or at least have option B, please do that. Don't be one of these people that are stuck there at the last minute and then all your freedoms have been taken away and you have no chance and no choice. Take advantage of it now. What I would say to your listeners is DM me. Just send me a message on Substack. I'm happy to have a chat and do what I can to help. I believe in helping as many people as possible. And I don't want it to sound too dark and dangerous and gloomy, but ultimately, I think this is what's coming down the road for a lot of Europe. And if you had the chance to get out, I would. I'd recommend you do it as well. And as I said, I'm happy to help, and send me a message on Substack. It's just about helping people from that point of view. I have nothing else to add on that, Ben.
Before I let you get out of here, I do have to ask my traditional closing question, which is, what book should I add to my reading list? Can be history, finance, anything else.
What book should you add to your reading list? That is a very good point. I would recommend, it's one that I've got in my cupboard that you can see behind me. It's called The Great Depression, a Diary, and I think it's by a gentleman named Benjamin Roth. I highly recommend you read that. Reason being, he owned a business in, I think it was Ohio, I think it was. He lived through the Great Depression, and he made a diary about it. And the comments and his thoughts are absolutely fascinating. So I would highly recommend that. If you give me a second, let me just go and get it out of my cupboard.
Yeah, no problem.
I can show you it. So I've got it in here. Yeah, it's spot on. So it's this one here. The Great Depression, a Diary by Benjamin Roth.
Interesting.
So I highly recommend you read that. Yeah, he was basically a lawyer in Youngstown, Ohio. Was doing well for himself at the time, and lived through the crisis, and he made a very good diary of it. And it's not just a diary in like 1929, 1930. This goes all the way up to, I think, like the 1950s. So he's also got the years afterwards about what happened and why. So if you think history is going to not necessarily repeat itself, but certainly rhyme, I'd highly recommend adding that book to your list, and then you can get an even better understanding of what that was like to live through, and then maybe that might impact your playbook moving forward.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. If my listeners are looking to find your work, whether it's on Substack or maybe social media, where should they look for you?
Well, the best place to find me, Ben, is contrariancapitalist.substack.com. We do 8 to 10 newsletters a month. We do a commodity wrap every Friday, a equity wrap, market indices wrap every Sunday. I do those bi-weekly videos with Chris Steadley of Life Sport Commodity Korner as well. And it also gives you access to any paywalled podcasts, but also early access to all of the interview podcasts as well. So contrariancapitalist.substack.com. Come and find me over there. And as I mentioned earlier, if you've got questions on Plan B, Plan Cs, anything like that, just feel free to send me a message. I'll do my best to help. And also you can follow that journey, because I do write about that as well on the Substack. But ultimately, Substack is the best place, contrariancapitalist.substack.com.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate taking the time to come on today. I think the listeners will get a lot out of it, whether it's talking about Plan B or getting out of Europe, some of the political circus going on there, but definitely markets as well. So I definitely, it's interesting to hear what your kind of take is on Great Depression and some of these different things. And that book, I'll definitely have to check out as well. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. I think with that, we'll be wrapping up. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.